Hello, welcome to my channel. I'm Rebecca. I'm an animal communicator and spiritual medium. Before we get started on today's video, I will give a bit of a disclaimer, a trigger warning, because I know many of you that follow me here do so because you deeply care and love animals and you are wanting to understand them better and to learn how we can, as humans, live in harmony with them. This video it's difficult for me to make. It was a difficult channeling session because it involves animal cruelty. And while I'm aware that animal cruelty goes on throughout the world, it can be very difficult to listen to and to go through, hearing the things that have been done to animals. So I would just advise that you either perhaps skip this one if you really feel that you cannot listen to the details. There's nothing really super gory. I've tried to, because I don't think it's fair to put that out there to you. I've tried to explain it in a kind of a gentler way, but with keeping the facts so that you are aware of just how barbaric and traumatic the animals I'm going to talk about today experience life. But also bearing in mind that, if you are sensitive, that it is something that's difficult and you may want to perhaps only listen to the video in small sections, or you may want to skip this one entirely and revisit it if at any point you feel stronger. One thing I would ask is that you do, if you have found it informative and interesting and you think that other people should be aware of the kind of things that are still going on in the world today with animals, that you please do give it a like, a thumbs up. And I know that sounds weird when we're talking about things that are really not pleasant, but a dislike doesn't help to get it out to more people. A like helps to promote it and get the message out there more. So I would really appreciate that. So let's talk about Laika. Laika is a dog who was from the streets of Russia. She's often remembered as being the first dog in space, but she was actually the first astronaut dog in space. There were many animals that went before her. She was the first living creature that orbited the Earth. In November the 3rd, 1957 at 5:30 a.m. is when she made that flight. And the way in which Laika came into my awareness was about 6 months ago. The animal kingdom had come to me and asked that I would raise more awareness around the inhumane treatment of animals for research purposes and testing, things like animal testing with, cosmetics, pharmaceuticals, things like that. And at the time, because it's something that really deeply upsets me, I had said to them I didn't feel strong enough to be able to do them justice without being upset and without being angry and trying to maintain that balance. So I had said to them, I would revisit it when I felt that I was able to do so. And one of the things about working with spirit is you never really choose. You never really choose the messages that want to be shared. It's what's for the highest good of humanity. If I'm doing one-to-one sessions, it's for the highest good of the animal, for the highest good of the people. Messages are always shared with love, and they are always shared with the intention that they do not cause fear. They raise awareness, they give guidance, and they help us to expand our perspective. And so the animal kingdom had been quite patient with me, and I've thought about it a couple of times over the last couple of months and just thought, am I ready to do this? Could I do it? And each time I felt deeply upset and thought there's no way I'd get through a video doing this. And then about 3 weeks ago, I was suddenly aware of the presence of this sweet little dog with a gentle, bright personality around me. And sometimes when that occurs, it could be ahead of a booking that might be coming in for an animal session or a one-to-one session with humans where it's an animal in spirit that wants to communicate. But this felt a bit different, and this little dog was quite persistent, and I suddenly heard Laika. Now, I only know the name Laika because we were told, not in any great detail, but we were told how great she was at school, you know, the first dog in space, and isn't it amazing? And at the time, as a kid, I remember thinking, wow, that is amazing. Like, a dog went to space. How cool. Like, you know, when kids are all like, oh, I'd love to go to space. I'd love to go to the moon. We weren't told any details. We were just told how amazing it was that this dog went to space. And it was all dressed up in a really, you know, a lovely way. And so as I heard the name and I connected into this energy of this little dog that had been following me around, I realized that it was her. And I didn't know previously, but she was a Husky Spitz mix. And if you followed me for a while, you know that I have a Siberian Husky. So it was just lovely. It was like I pieced those two things together. And as soon as I acknowledged her, she let me know she was here to help me with the work I'd previously said I was unable to do, because it would be more of a channeled session. It would be more on a one-to-one basis. And she let me know that she would be here to support me through this session so that I could deliver some information to you to understand what the animals go through. And so I feel very blessed today to bring Laika forward and to be able to share some of her experiences with you, and for us to just gain a better understanding of the real need for us to view animals differently and to treat them differently, and to realize that they are not there for our entertainment. They're not there for us to use as opposed to using humans. And just to understand from their point of view how they actually find these situations that we put them in. We have to remember that they don't choose to be in these situations. In cases of research, we've put them in those situations. So one of the things I will say is there's a lot of information out there. If you go and search, you will be bombarded with information. And some of it's a bit confusing. Some of it's a bit contradictory. You know, figures and things don't quite add up. And when I speak about some of the things that occurred, you will understand that there was a lot of false information that was put out there at the time. So it's been quite hard to kind of dig through and find the facts. But I've got my notebook. I didn't realize during the session when I was working with Laika and researching how many pages of notes I had written. So if I'm looking down a lot, I'm just going through my notes. One thing I've said before is that whenever I am asked to channel, whether it's a human spirit or an animal spirit, usually I don't really do any research at the start, because I don't like it to give me any bias on the channeling session. So this was a very different way of working, because what Laika said to me was, she wanted me to research while she sat beside me. She wanted me to research, to see the facts. She wanted me to see them in real time, and for her to be able to say to me, right, and at this point, I felt like this, and to also immerse me, spiritually, to take me to that time, that moment in time where she was experiencing it. So I was fully immersed in her life at that time and her experience. So this was quite a difficult and different way of working for me, stepping into both the kind of the research energy and also having her beside me. But I fully understand now why she did that, because it was traumatizing. I was traumatized. I was so upset and so very, very angry at the way that humans treat animals. And I know this is just a small example. I know it goes on all the time. But just to read about it, and you will see as I go through this, the way in which things were reported is just such a disservice to this beautiful dog. And she wanted me to be aware of that. She wanted me to feel the difficulty of having her beside me, and also me reading what was put out there for other people to enjoy and to effectively hold up in history as some fantastic achievement. So let's get into some more of the facts around it. I just wanted to give you a bit of a background so that you understood how Laika came to me and how this is for me as well. It's difficult for me to relay these things to you But I really hope that I will do Laika justice today as we go through this information. So as I said, Laika was a street dog from Moscow, and she was estimated to be around 2 years old at the time that she was taken off the streets. And something I hadn't realised was the Soviet space program at the time actually had a team of people that went to scour the streets looking for dogs as test subjects. And that in itself to me is just awful. They said that they couldn't choose domesticated animals because they would be too pampered. So they already knew they were taking animals that had had a difficult time, searching for their own food, keeping themselves safe. You think they have to keep themselves safe from traffic, from predators, from other humans. They already had a really tough life, and straight off the bat, this team knew that. They knew what they were looking for. And the other thing, and this is actually super important, the other thing was they only chose female dogs because female dogs were gentler, calmer, and easier to get to do what they wanted them to do. They were less aggressive, they had found. And as soon as I read that, Laika said to me, this is happening in humanity too. The attack on the divine feminine, which we have seen a lot throughout the years, and the kind of dumbing down of women, like when women had to be housewives and they weren't allowed to go out to work, when women weren't allowed to vote. This has a very similar energy to that they chose female dogs because they were more subservient. And they also chose female dogs because when I get into about how they were put into these capsules, because female dogs don't lift their legs to urinate. And they chose short-haired dogs because it wouldn't interfere with the electrodes that they placed on them. It felt very prominent to me when Laika said to me, this has and is occurring in humanity also, that crushing of the divine feminine. So that feels very important. So Sputnik 2 was the ship that she went on. And the thing that, one of the very first things that I read, you'll see as I go through this, like I'm in disbelief just, recalling it to you as well through my notes. They expected, this is what it said, they expected her to die from oxygen deprivation within 15 seconds after 7 days in space, and it would be painless. They expected her to die. They took a living creature knowing full well she was going to die. Like, that is just absolutely horrendous. That was, like, as soon as I read that, I was like, this is awful. But it got much worse than that. The more I read, the more, and I've even, in the margin in my notes, I've written so many times WTF, because I was just, it was like reading a terrible screenplay and thinking, well, this will never be a popular movie. But this was real life. This happened to this sweet dog. It's happened to countless other animals. And it's just horrendous. So she was the first living creature to go into orbit around the Earth. Before her, there were many other animals. And this is where it was a bit difficult to find out, because some places said that between 1951 and 1966, there were dogs launched into flight 71 times with 17 deaths. But if you actually look it up, you can kind of type it in yourself, how many animals were in space. You'll see that there were various countries that did it with varying results. Many of the animals did die. And it wasn't, we're talking about her and her connection, this was the Soviet space program, but before anyone jumps on that and they're like, well, of course it would be them. The US did it, France did it, China did it. this isn't limited. This is a widespread thing. So yeah, it's a little bit sketchy as to, you know, where and how many went into space, but you can look it up. There's just some, you know, varying records. It's quite hard to narrow down exactly how many went in there. Another reason that they chose female dogs was because they were generally smaller, and they only had a space of 35 centimeters in height where they were put into these capsules. Photo of her in the capsule, and it made me feel sick to look at it, because she can't move. You know, we talk about, for those of us who have dogs, and perhaps people that have used crate training, they always say the crate has to be big enough for them to be able to sit, stand, and turn around comfortably. Because of their welfare, they have to be able to move around. It's not good for their bones, it's not good for their joints, it's not good for their circulation, and it's also cruel. So to see the size that she was put into, she was quite a small dog, but still she had no room to move. We need to remember she had no room to move. And so that, again, is just awful. The other thing is that they had a specific payload for this, for Sputnik 2. The capsule couldn't be over a certain weight. They were looking for dogs that were around 5 to 6 kilos in weight. And some genius had the idea that if they fed her only once while she was up there, then it would be lighter and they wouldn't exceed the payload that they needed. They fed her only once. This is madness. When you read that she was supposed to be up there for 7 days, can you imagine for 7 days that you only had one meal? Just every single point of this that I go through, and part of the reason that I'd said previously to the Animal Kingdom that I couldn't do this video is because you'll see how angry and upset I am about this. But they were like, don't apologise. Don't apologise. It's valid. It's holy anger. And I am angry. I'm so angry that this ever happened. I'm so angry that these kind of things still continue to happen. And we have to raise awareness. So she was only going to be given one meal, bearing in mind they thought she would last 7 days. Now, when I read that, I was really upset. And Laika showed me, she showed me a hand giving her a bowl of food, and it was like a chopped up meat. I don't know what it was, but I was seeing that and thinking, oh, you know, that she got fed before the flight. But then later on in my research, I actually found that there was one female physician who actually broke protocol and fed her before she took off, because she was like, this dog's going to need to be fed. So let's remember what I've said before about, even in really dark places, there are lights within the darkness. There are good people. And while I believe that anyone who works in those places clearly doesn't truly care about animals, because you could not pay me enough money to work in one of those research centres, knowing, even if I was in admin, knowing what went on in the lab, you could not pay me enough money to set foot in one of those places. So even though there's a lot of darkness and they knew what they were doing, and I truly believe that there is something wrong with people that would do this to people or to animals, that they have something missing in them, some level of empathy and connection. They're probably not even connected to their own, you know, they're not connected to themselves deeply. They're definitely not connected to animals deeply. And in this case, they were seen as test subjects. However, this female physician obviously had some shred of compassion, despite the fact she was working in this awful environment, to feed Laika. And Laika said not everyone was horrible there. She said it wasn't a case of people were, you know, physically hitting her or torturing her in ways that we would think of as the usual ways of abuse. But she said that everything was very clinical. People didn't really interact with her. And she showed me, like, if they picked her up, they didn't kind of pick her up and say, come on, Laika, and move her around. They just picked her up and moved her. There was no real interaction. She was kind of just, she was just a thing. Yeah, that's what she's saying. I was an object to be used. And that made me feel really sad, but I did take some small, minuscule comfort in the fact that this person did seek to be kind in that moment and feed her. My notes kind of feel like, because I wrote a note and then I went back. There was a bit that I read and I can't find anything else on it. I only found it in one place, that Laika was actually placed into the capsule 3 days before takeoff. And it doesn't say whether she stayed in the capsule or whether she was just put in there to try it out. She said to me several hours. She was in it for several hours. It wasn't a case of like, if you're put in somewhere, you know, like thinking about like babies, when you tuck a baby into bed, you put a baby into a crib, you check, don't like, you put them in and then you check all around them that they're laying comfortably, that they're tucked in. It wasn't like that with her. They kind of just put her in. They didn't check that she was comfortable, that her legs weren't in an awkward position or anything like that. They didn't go around and check with that care. And so because she didn't have a lot of space to move, she was showing me that her front leg was quite uncomfortable. She was trying to kind of like, you know how you would shift if you're feeling uncomfortable and you've been sitting for a long time. She would try to shift, but because there wasn't a lot of room, she couldn't move. And so she had this in her front leg, like where the paw bends. She had this like, it was almost like the feeling was like it was an ache, but it kind of turned into a cramp. And that made me really sad as well, because obviously she didn't have a voice. She couldn't say that, you know, I'm uncomfortable. Could you move me? She was given the name Laika because it means barker, and she had been barking a lot. And, you know, the feeling with her was she knew that this wasn't a happy place. She knew that there was something more to come, is what she said. She knew that, she said that she had this foreboding feeling. She knew that she hadn't landed on her feet here. So, and she said actually she was quite happy. She was quite happy as a street dog. And she was showing me like she had like a little crew that she used to run around with. And there was actually an even smaller dog that was part of this little crew. And they all kind of looked after each other. So she knew this wasn't, and that, I think that's incredibly sad as well. It was like she knew that this wasn't going to be a happy experience, but she had no power. She was at the mercy of people. She had no power to actually remove herself from that situation. So let's have a look. This is one thing, and again, I feel like perhaps I was a little bit naive. Obviously, I know animal testing still goes on, but it just really irritated me. So, like, in this modern age of technology, and you think about how they use computer modelling for so many things, why can't they do that for this situation? Animals are still sent to space today for research on the International Space Station. They are still sent today. Now, when you read it, and this is another thing that's triggering and made me annoyed, when you read it, they say, oh, but there's no real big animals that go to space anymore. It's just worms, zebrafish, Japanese rice fish, Venus frogs, embryos, flies, and bees. But the only mammals that are sent now are mice. As if we're not sending dogs and monkeys anymore, so that's okay. We're just sending these little insignificant things. No. They are still living beings. They are still creatures. They still have a life. They still are here to experience life, to experience joy. They don't deserve this mad testing from these crazy scientists. And the even more annoying thing is that it says they're sent up there. This is mental. They are sent up there, and this comes from NASA, for the purposes of colonizing space or modelling disease. Okay, so animals that are designed to live on the Earth, and I feel very much the same about humans. We can't even look after the Earth, so why on earth would we be able to go colonize another planet? Animals that live on the Earth are here on the Earth because that is where, you know, that's where they were put. That's where Spirit chose to incarnate. Animals themselves aren't going to go, do you know what, really fancy going to space, wonder if I could live up there. So why the hell are we sending them up there saying, oh, well, with a view to colonising? Well, no, the animals are never going to go up there. They're not. They are never going to go up there unless we put them up there. Mad, crazy people that just want to take control of everything. And it's just absolute madness to me. Honestly, when I read this to you, I feel balmy saying it because it's absolute madness. In no sane, kind, loving world does it make sense to be doing this. And they also wanted to see the effects of space on these animals so that they knew how it would hurt humans. Isn't that interesting? Now, one thing that really annoys me is the whole testing on animals to see how it affects humans. Now, animal bodies, while there are some similarities across some species with us, are incredibly different. And also, especially like when you're testing makeup, you're never going to see an animal wearing makeup. They're never going to choose to do that because it's not natural to them. So why would we test something on them when they're never going to have that? If we're so desperate for all of these things for humans to enjoy, to have, to enhance our lives, then let's test it on us. Let's test it on ourselves. And that's something that really got me thinking at a deeper level, because I've always loved makeup. I loved fashion. And in my younger years, I used to, I didn't really, I was never, I'd say I was never cruel to animals. I've said before, I didn't used to think anything of killing spiders. They used to terrify me. But obviously, in the work I do, I've since learned that that wasn't the way. But I would never outwardly be cruel to animals. And my understanding was that animal testing did not occur in the UK because that's how it was sold to us. However, in more recent years, I found out that it does still occur. And the reason that it can occur is because people can apply for permits. As long as you have a valid reason to say why you need to do it, it's still permitted. So to say that we're a great nation, and I always felt, I guess a little bit superior, that we're so good, we don't do those awful things. And then to find out the truth, again, it's all about the flowery language that's used. And when you look a little deeper, you find out that actually it's not what we've been told. I never used to think when, I'd go and buy makeup that I wanted. I'd go and buy the makeup that I loved the colours of, new glitter eyeliner and things like that. All the things like that before I was aware of that things were toxic because they were sold as, if they were sold and they were on the shelf and it was eye makeup or whatever, it was safe because it wouldn't be sold in shops otherwise. How naive I was when I was younger. But I never used to think about animals in labs having things put in their eyes or put on their skin and hurting them. I just used to buy makeup. It just blows my mind that we wouldn't use humans. If it's for us to enjoy, to use for our benefit, why wouldn't we use ourselves? And then it just makes me think, we're so terrified of our own the fact that we can die, that life isn't forever on the earth. We're so terrified of that, we don't want to put ourselves at risk. But do we not see the irony that those animals deserve to live? They're here, they want to experience life. They're not harming us. You're not seeing animals coming into our world and using us to test out their theories or modelling for their lives. They're not doing that. So why are we doing it the other way around? Why are we so afraid of death that we will use other living beings and not bother about the fact that they deserve to live? Was it Maya Angelou who said, once you know better, you can do better? And I think that's really important. Part of my work is sharing awareness, sharing wisdom from the animal kingdom to help you understand them, to learn and understand that they are living, breathing beings that have they have joy, they have sadness, they want to learn, they want to grow, and they're trying to live in harmony with us. So my work is all about raising that awareness and sharing the wonder of nature and the animal kingdom so that we can learn to live in harmony and move forward. So when I was looking at all of this and I was shocked about, these saying that these animals are, oh, well, we're not sending like the bigger animals, the more important things. it raises a question of how do we decide, and why should we decide that some animal lives are more important than others? And then again, it brought me back, and I often find this in my work, the parallels between what humanity is experiencing and the lessons that the animal kingdom are showing. And what Laika showed me was it's happening again in our world. It's happening with, with conflict in other countries. And you'll see all over social media the sides that are taken, that, this country deserves everything that's happening to them, or these people deserve it. And there's no humanity, because we're not in that country, we're not experiencing it. It's very easy to listen to hate rhetorics and propaganda and to actually not know the facts. And the truth is, unless we live in those countries, we don't know the facts. And sometimes even in those countries, we don't know the facts because we're shielded from it by, the powers that should not be. But how do we decide? How do we decide that, yes, those people deserve to live? Yes, those people deserve to die. What gives us the right? What gives us the right to decide that? And that's what she was showing me with this, them saying now, it's okay because we don't send dogs and monkeys anymore. We just send fish. We just send bees. There's not just anything. Everything is valid. Everything deserves life. Everything is special. And I think that that's a really awful thing that humans do. Why do we decide that some people are better than others, that some people deserve our time more than others? Where did that come from, and why do we think like that? And I would just urge you to look at yourself. Like, where do you see that in your own life? Can you pick up moments where you've had those feelings? And I've certainly had them. I remember, going off topic a little bit, but going back to when I was about 18 or 19, I was getting some money out of a cash point in a city. And I will say, as an 18, 19-year-old female, I felt intimidated and scared, which is part of why I reacted the way I did. But now looking back, I feel quite disgusted. I was getting some money out of the cash point, and it wasn't very much. I think it was just £20. It wasn't a lot. I was just going to get a few bits from the shop. And this really dirty, really scruffy homeless guy was by the cash point, and he said, "Can you spare some change?" And obviously I was getting cash out, so I didn't have change. And I just said to him, "I'm sorry, I don't have any change." And he launched into this absolute rant, and he followed me, and I was scared. And I can't remember exactly what happened, if I screamed at him to just leave me alone, or he said to me, and I've never forgotten his words, he said to me, "One day you could be homeless. You don't care about people like me. One day you could be homeless." And I remember at the time thinking, and I don't think I said it to him, but thinking, well, I won't, because I work. I'd never be homeless. Because propaganda was drummed into us that all homeless people were druggies, alcoholics, and they deserved to be on the streets because they were too lazy to work. That is what we were taught growing up. I'm not talking about my parents, I'm talking about society. Growing up, that is what was drummed into us. So we automatically started viewing those people as less than. And I will say, in later years, I have actually stopped and I have asked if they would like a drink or a sandwich. I have actually done that, and I've interacted with those people to try to make amends for my ignorance. But where do we do that? Why do we do that? How has that happened, that we don't see others the same as us just because of our differences? So I'd urge you to look into your own life and to see, because Laika is reminding us that every life is sacred, every life is important, and who are we to judge what's more important than another? So moving on, some of the side effects of going into space are effects to heart and brain function, muscle atrophy, bone loss, neuronal changes, premature aging, modulation of the immune system, shifts in the microbiome, and how microbes and pathogens interact. And that's a whole host of horrible things, isn't it, that could happen to you going into space. It's no wonder humans don't want to do it without knowing how it's going to be. But again, you send a dog into space, how are you going to know, well, that's what would happen to Dave if we sent Dave into space? We don't know, and it's just ridiculous. Laika said to me, Um, when I read about the fact that they're still sending animals to the International Space Station for research purposes, she says to me, "Enough is enough, not in my name. It was not a success. It was a cruel advancement of power over a trusting species." And when you type in her name and you look on the internet, it's all praise about how amazing it was, what an achievement, what a great feat that we sent a dog into space. It's all dressed up in lovely, lovely flowery language to pretend it was something that it actually wasn't. It was animal abuse, it was cruelty at the worst level. And I'm really glad that she says that, not in my name. She will not have her name associated with the success, because it wasn't a success. And she's right, dogs are very trusting, and we know that ourselves. For anyone that has a dog or knows people with dogs are very trusting. And she reminded me about, with rescue animals, it doesn't matter, you see some dogs that have been through such barbaric treatment by humans, and yet they are still open to trusting again, to loving again. And I think it's both beautiful and very sad. I think it's very sad because partly it's like, what choice do they have? They have to be willing to trust again in the hope that life will become better. But also it's beautiful in the fact that we can see that animals are capable of unconditional love, something that I would say most humans are not capable of. So she distances herself from it. She doesn't want to be reminded or remembered for being a success, because her death wasn't a success. It was disgusting. It should never have happened. She was actually, despite the fact she was a street dog, she was quite happy where she was. As I said, she had her little crew with her. She didn't really need that. She said they, meaning like the scientists, the researchers, they were so caught up in ego, nothing made them see sense. There were many dissenting voices, but none of them were heard. And she was showing me like a big board meeting in the research facility, where many people were talking about these very things we're discussing today, saying that, it wasn't ethical, wasn't moral, was there another way? Should we be doing this? Factoring in the things like the only feeding them once in this flight, and they thought she was going to die from oxygen deprivation. Would it truly be painless? There were dissenting voices. So again, like I say to you, there's a lot of darkness. There's always light in the darkness. There are always those people that are willing to stand up and put their head above the parapet to call out things that they see that are wrong. And that does give me some comfort. But what she was saying was it was just so driven by ego. And she was saying there was a lot of funding for this. It was, you hear about the great space race of who got to space first. And this was part of that time where it was, smaller things, I believe, had been sent up into space by others, but animals never had. So, for the Soviets, having her make an actual orbit around the Earth was like, woohoo, like, look at us, we're the best, we achieved this. It was, like she said, it was just ego, power, greed. It was absolute madness. The animals were stopped being viewed as sentient beings, and they were, like she said earlier, they were just objects to help them achieve whatever mad desires and goals they had. And there was a lot of funding that went into that. So she was left with one meal, and as I said earlier, that's just madness. Imagine having 7 days, and I know a lot of people do fasting. You fast for 2 or 3 days. Imagine having 7 days. And not just 7 days chilling out, relaxing. Perhaps if you were on holiday lying by the pool all day, you could perhaps manage it for 4 or 5 days. But imagine the stress upon your body of being in space, like we just said about those horrible side effects, the cramped conditions that she was in, the fact that it would have been very hot. Imagine that, and not having any food. Imagine the feeling of, if you've ever been really, really hungry, that gnawing feeling of like just being really hungry and not being able to eat. So that was just awful anyway. And then as I got further into my research, I found that the one meal that they left this sweet, kind, gentle dog was poisoned. It was poisoned. Because, oh, well, if she didn't die from the oxygen deprivation, we hoped she'd eat the food and she'd die that way. Well, poisoning, as I've said before in my video about the rats, when the rats actually showed me and let me feel how horrific it is when they are poisoned, that wouldn't have been a slow, painless death, would it? So they knew what they were doing. They had absolutely no regard for her at all. They poisoned the one meal that they gave her. And imagine if you were absolutely starving. And dogs are very good. All animals are very good. They know when things are safe and when things aren't, and they will refuse things. Even sometimes, like, if something's gone slightly off and humans can't smell it, they won't touch it. And that is a sign they know that something is not good with that food. Imagine being in that situation of being so hungry, but smelling something off with that food, knowing at a deeper level that that was bad for you and that was your choice. Eat the food because I'm starving. It could potentially be harmful. Just as I said, every single part I went through on this was just worse and worse and worse. And I kept waiting for it to get better, and it didn't get better. And it's part of the reason I'm so angry. And it's, you generally don't see me, I'm passionate, but you generally don't see me angry on any of my videos because, most of what I cover, I can see a balanced view and I can see a clear way through. And for this, I cannot justify any of it. I can't say, oh, we achieved anything. I can't. There's nothing. There is no justification for what they did and what they continue to do. It was just absolutely, just so awful. When Laika first came to me, and I didn't really know a great deal about her. As I said, I knew of her, but didn't really know in detail anything because when I had learnt about her as a child, it was all dressed up in, it was all really lovely. And I believe they actually did make a cartoon about Laika as well, again, showing how great it was and how much fun she had in space. And, I just think really actually quite sick, very psychopathic. But when she first came to me, I kept seeing this vision of her in a living room with a bright rug and a man in a white shirt bending down with a tie on, holding out his hand with a ball. And I saw a young boy and a young girl sitting on this rug. And I was thinking, well, is that a life she had before when I didn't really know, where did she come from? How did she end up going in the space program? Was that her family? I didn't know. But what I actually came to find out, and again, I cannot get into the mindset of these people that did this. There was a scientist called Vladimir Yadovsky. I hope I've said that correctly. He took her home to play with his kids prior to this. And when you read up about what he said, about why he did it, he took her home to play with his kids because he wanted to do something nice for her, knowing what little time she had left. Just let that sink in. She didn't have little time left. She had little time left because of the barbaric things that were done to her. She could have had many years left if she had been left on the street with her happy little crew that she was with. You didn't do anything nice. You did something to try to ease your own guilt. And also, how cruel, how utterly cruel to take her into a warm home with children who I'm sure were very kind to her. To have that false sense of joy and happiness and relaxing and thinking, oh, this is nice, I feel safe, I'm home. To then be taken back the next day and treated like she was. It's utterly, the more I read through this, the more I was like, these people were absolute psychopaths. There is no other way to describe them. Cannot get my head around it. And I've tried so hard to have a balanced view. And as I said, this is part of the reason that several months ago, when the Animal Kingdom asked me to speak about these kind of things, I couldn't do it because I could not take my emotion out of it. I could not step back from it. And hearing Laika say to me that it's holy rage and she wanted me to show my humanness, because that's how every human should feel. We should feel outraged. We should feel deeply saddened that this continues in our world today. And I just cannot get my head around it. I'm still, as I'm recounting this back to you from my research, I'm still like, how can this be real? It's absolute madness. I cannot get my head around it. On November the 3rd, 1957 at 5:30 a.m. when Laika was put in the capsule, and there is a photo of her in the capsule. It just made me very sad, as I said earlier, because she really didn't have any room. She was sent up into space and she orbited the Earth. I was just trying to read. I'm sure I wrote down how many times she orbited the Earth. I want to say, I think it was 3 or 4 times. 3 or 4 times she orbited the Earth. Her heart rate tripled. Her breath quadrupled. She circled the Earth in 103 minutes. And then her capsule overheated to 40 degrees Celsius, causing her bodily stress, severe panic, and she died. 40 degrees Celsius. Now, right now where I am in the UK, we are having a glorious summer. I love the sun. We've had days where it's been 28, 29 Celsius, and it's hot. And for any of us that, have animals, you know that you're changing your patterns of exercising them, you're putting fans on, cooling mats. We're doing everything we can to make sure our animal companions are comfortable during the heat. Obviously there are many animals that live in countries far hotter than this, but because in the UK we don't get we have kind of like our weather changes with the seasons, and so we don't get a great deal of really hot weather. It does happen every now and again, but we don't always get really hot summers. But we adapt and we do things kindly to think about our animals. And I remember going on holiday one time to Greece, and you know how when you've stayed in a hotel and you're leaving and you can't go back to the room, can you? Sometimes you have a long time to wait before you get picked up for your transfer, depending on what time your flight is. And I remember this one time I was in Zante and I knew that when I went home it wasn't going to be so warm. So I had jeans on and a t-shirt. And I remember, and I can still remember the feeling of standing in the lobby, waiting for the transfer, and it was 42 degrees. I remember there was a big temperature sensor thing up above the pool, and it was 42 degrees, and I was so hot to the point that I felt claustrophobic, because I was obviously, when you're on holiday and you're in your swimwear and you can nip in and out of your room and get the aircon on, or you can go in the pool or the sea, you know that you can cool down. But when you're there, you're waiting, and you can't go back to the room, you can't go in the pool because your time's up on holiday, you're there in your clothes and you're hot and you can feel claustrophobic. And I was reminded of that feeling with her, but this was even worse because she couldn't move, she couldn't get out, she couldn't get away. She couldn't call to anyone and say, I'm too hot, help, I don't like this. She overheated from the stress and she died. And I know that people would wish to think, well, it was probably really quick. The stress probably killed her. She had a heart attack. But what she showed me, she had this immense crushing pain in her head. And that would have been a combination of the pressure and the heat. Because dogs can overheat very quickly. She was absolutely terrified. I can't even put into words the feeling that she impressed upon me about how she felt. She was so terrified. And I care deeply about all animals, but having a dog of my own and knowing that, there's been times when she's been afraid, or she's too hot, so I've tried to help her cool down, or when she's been, recovering after any procedures or anything like that. I know that they look to us for comfort. I know that in those moments they are like scared children. And she was so afraid, and she had no one to comfort her. And the very people that should have cared about her were the ones that put her in this situation. And let's remember, like I said earlier on, they expected her to die. This wasn't that they hoped she would come back. They expected her to die. That is out and out abuse. That is, to me, that's just like premeditated murder. That they knew it. They knew it. And the thing was as well, reading about it, with the Sputnik 2, they had the capability to send a dog into space, but they didn't really have the capabilities to bring them back in. And when you look at, not just with the Soviet space program, but when you look at, there are lists online. When you look at the details of the animals that went into space and what happened to them, did they make it back? Did they not make it back? You will see that many of them that died did so unnecessarily. It was through faults. It was through just this mad race. Like she said, it was all driven by ego and power. Just this mad race to be so famous and remembered for achievements. They're disgusting. I hope these people are remembered for the cruelty they inflicted on animals. That's what I want them to be remembered for, because they aren't heroes. They are awful people. People that had no compassion, no care for another living being, and power, greed, and fame was all that was important to them. And even if people are wanting to research, and I do believe that many people who work in the research field, so this isn't an attack on them, do so because they want things better for humanity. However, in finding things that are better for us and better ways for us, we should not be inflicting pain or death on other living beings in our name. We shouldn't. So there is actually, you can see they're declassified now. You can go online and you can search and you can see the printouts. So electrodes were put all over Laika's body to monitor her heart rate and her breathing. And one of the really barbaric things as well that I didn't mention at the start was that, as I had said to you about how they chose female dogs also because they don't cock their leg to urinate, they put this, I think they called it like a sanitation device, which I couldn't find any pictures of, but when you see her, like she was all bundled up in all kinds of like stuff, a device. And when they tested several dogs, and it's just awful as well. So they put this device on them basically so that they wouldn't go to the toilet in the capsule. They would go to the toilet in this device. And what they said was, in testing on the ground, all of the dogs that they tested, they found that some of them were so afraid of using this device, they didn't like the sensation, because obviously it's alien to them, it's not natural, it's not normal. They would hold on to their waist. They would hold on to their waist until the device was removed. They were too afraid to go to the toilet. How disgusting is that? Thinking that, being so afraid, and you might have had it before. I know some people do have it with like public toilets. They will have anxiety about other people hearing them go to the toilet, or just have anxiety in general about going. So they will hold on to it and they won't go. And imagine being an animal and being so terrified, because that's what it was. They were so terrified that they would hold on to their waist. Think how damaging that is for the body. The body needs to be continually getting rid of waste for the kidneys, for the bowel, for optimum health of the body. Think about how damaging that is, not only mentally, emotionally, but also physically. And because she found it kind of easy to use, that's another reason that they chose her, because she didn't hold on to her waist and she didn't try to take it off. And she says that was her downfall. Her pliability is what she's calling it. Her pliability, which had served her so well as a street dog to fit into the environment she was in, to navigate, feeding, going to the toilet, all of those things. her pliability was her downfall, because she was just very adaptable. And you see that with people, don't you? You see people get taken advantage of who are very open to kind of changing their behaviors in order to fit in. And I think that that's incredibly sad as well. Really, really sad. But you can online, there are, as I was just saying before I interrupted with this, there are printouts that have been declassified now that you can see, and you can see the graphs of when her heart rate and her breathing increased. And just seeing it, you know, obviously seeing the pictures of her and working with her is sad enough, but just to see that as well, that visual representation of the stress that she endured with no one coming to save her, just really, really broke my heart. It was just so sad. So that happened in the 1950s. In 1993, Oleg Gazenko, who was one of her instructors who had trained her to kind of get into a harness to get into the capsule, he revealed that she actually died soon after takeoff. And previously, the authorities had lied. Now, this is, again, like I said at the start, this is why I think a lot of the information is kind of missing bits and is a little bit all over the place, because just like we know that things get covered up, I think a lot of us are much more aware now that the truth is not always what we're told it is. Sometimes it's between a lie and the truth. Sometimes it is an outright lie. And that's why discernment is so important. The authorities lied and covered it up, saying that she survived for several days. It was only after 9 days after she had died that they actually announced her death. But they continued to lie and imply that she lived longer than she did. But he said, her instructor said, because remember, they had cameras in there as well, and that was another thing. They chose dogs that had interesting colouring because it would show up better, the contrast would show up better on the film. So he would have been part of the crew on the ground that would have been watching, observing, looking at her vitals as one of her training instructors. Which, again, I don't like that term, a training instructor. It implies that she was undertaking training willingly. She was not. She did not choose any of this. She was instructed to do it. There was no training. She was doing it because you wanted her to do it, whether she liked it or not. She was chosen. That was her destiny, and you had decided her fate. So I don't like these flowery terms that they use of training instructor. It implies that she was cooperating. She wasn't a willing participant at all. She put up with it. She went along with it, as many dogs do. They have a and many animals do. They have this, you know, because they have unconditional love, they have a desire to please. They want to work in harmony with us. And, you know, I don't know. There were some people that were outwardly cruel to her, but when I asked to be shown, she wouldn't show me. And she said that was to protect me, because she already knew how difficult I was finding it, how difficult I am finding it to tell you about what went on. And I think she knew that if I saw, and she took me there to experience some of the things that did happen, I would have really struggled with it. So even now, after all of that was done to her, she's still considering others. She's still, you know, she still has that loving kindness, that compassion that was not shown to her. She really is such a beautiful soul. So going back to Oleg Gazenko, he'd said that she died soon after takeoff, and he said, "The more time passes, the more I'm sorry about it." But if you actually cared, you would never have been a part of it in the first place. He will have to be accountable for what he did. If not in this life, he will be in the next. But I do hope that it did remain forefront in his mind often, because I would like to think that he would have learnt from it, and that going forward he would not be a part of anything like that again. Again, in 2002, someone else came forward, Dmitry Malyshenkov, and he said she died from overheating and panic caused by a rushed and faulty temperature containment system. Now, again, as I said, you can look through the list of the animals that went to space and the issues and the ones that didn't make it, and there are many things that were wrong with the vessels that they went in. And again, it all goes back to this. They wanted to be the first. Everyone wanted to be the biggest and the best, and they let ego and greed get in the way of that. So they rushed things. They didn't design things properly. They didn't test things properly. It was just kind of a quick, DIY, let's put it together, let's do a brief test and let's go. They didn't care. They completely lost sight of what it should have been, that everything was rigorously checked and tested, and it wasn't. It was all just rushed. So on April the 14th, 1958, Sputnik 2 re-entered Earth's atmosphere and it disintegrated. And it was funny because as I was reading that and I felt her energy, we both had this collective sigh of relief, because it feels like, even though these things are still going on, it felt like with the disintegration of what was a terror chamber, that's what we'll call it. It was a terror chamber. Let's not call it a spaceship or a little capsule that she went. It wasn't. It was a terror chamber. With the disintegration of that, it was over. It was over. It couldn't go back. It couldn't be celebrated. The vessel. It would be, to me, it would be like putting a murder weapon in an exhibition and saying how amazing it was. Like, it's just a bit sick. So for her and for me, it felt like a line was very clearly drawn with the disintegration of it, that it went away. What I was being shown, and it was really beautiful. And at this point, it was a welcome change to the everything I was learning. She showed me this lush green paradise, like the Amazon rainforest, and there were macaws that were so brightly coloured flying around. This feeling of peace, this just warm, moist air and a gentle breeze. And it felt like that was really significant, because what she was saying was Mother Earth absorbed all of the remnants to let us know that all life is sacred. She absorbed it all back to close off that chapter and to let this be done. She took it all back. And I felt that was actually, it was very significant, but also very beautiful. And she also said it is a real reminder to look at what humans are doing there too in the Amazon, because I know there's a lot of deforestation and things like that, and animals, beautiful creatures, special species, the ecosystem is being threatened on a daily basis. So it's also a reminder for us to have a look at what humans are doing there as well. And she said, Mother Earth will only take so much. And I have brought that message kind of through before. Mother Earth is rising up. And that's a message that I receive from her, from Mother Earth often. We really have to start being accountable for everything we do. Life isn't all about us. Humans seem to think that we are the biggest and best thing on the planet, and that's not the case. We have a lot to learn. Excuse me. So I had a hard time with this, and she actually gave me a different perspective. So in 2008, and you think this happened in 1957, it was such a long time ago. So it's almost like she's been laid to rest. She has been laid to rest. With that debris, her soul lives on, and Mother Earth has absorbed her back into her loving arms. She was nature. She came from nature and she went back to nature. And she's just saying again, all life is sacred. We are all one. So I actually thought that was a fitting and quite beautiful end, even though it should never have been her end. And you have to remember, like I said, it was estimated she was only around 2 years old at the time. She was a baby. And I'm hearing her say if she had have stayed on the street, she would have lived till she was 14. She would have lived a lot longer. But in 2008, a monument was placed in Moscow outside of the military research station. And I struggled with that a little bit because, again, I said to you that this whole thing has been dressed up like some amazing, wonderful, isn't Laika great? She was the first dog in space, like some celebrity thing. And actually, it's just a story of torture. So I was annoyed about that because I thought it's a bit sick. It's almost like, haha, like, look what we did. Like, it's like an in joke, almost like they know what they did, but it's being presented this way for people to, and we have to remember everything is energy. So people come, people look, people have photos taken, they're putting their energy into it. And for me, it felt almost like harvesting of that energy for something that people were thinking was a good thing when actually they didn't know the entirety of what happened, which wasn't a good thing at all. So for me, when I first read about that, I was irritated and upset by it because it didn't sit right. But what she said to me was, and these are word for word what she said: many people genuinely felt aggrieved by what they found out. They wanted to honour her, but for some within the organisations who carried out this heinous experiment, it was to appease those with kinder hearts. And for some, it gave closure that as long as they acknowledged Laika, their conscience was clear. So for many that worked on it, it was like, oh, these people, humans that did care about animals, humans like you and I, they were so angry that this ever happened. They didn't know at the time, they didn't know the details. Obviously, we have the internet now and we have more information available to us. But they knew only what they were told and that she was a celebrity. So they only knew on a surface level that they were upset and angry and that an animal shouldn't be being put into space. They were annoyed. So it was like, oh, well, we'll just give them something that will make them feel better. So they created this statue, which ties into that feeling I was having about this wasn't a genuine, it wasn't done for the right reasons. But also, for some of those people, some people did feel guilty. There were some people that did feel guilty. And like I said about that, the other chap who said he thought about it often, and I hope he did, and I hope he changed his ways because of it. For some, having the statue out there was like, we've done our bit. People won't be annoyed anymore. We can still live off our victory. It was a victory for us. And that some of them genuinely felt like that. They didn't see anything wrong with what they did because they didn't view Laika as a living, sentient being. She was an object. And that's the word that she just kept saying, object. I was an object. And so for some of them, they just didn't care. And it was like, oh, well, as long as we've acknowledged her, like, my conscience is clear. And I feel very much like you could have sat down with those people, had a conversation, and the way that they would speak about it is very different to the way I'm talking to you about it now. There's no emotion. It was an experiment. Laika was an object. She was just the subject of the experiment. These were the findings. It was unfortunate it didn't work, but we can try it again. They were very matter of fact. They had no conscience about what they did, no compassion. And they genuinely went on about their lives without thinking about her ever again. Her name wasn't etched into their brains. It was just, they might as well have called it experiment number 1, And interestingly, when you look at some of these animals, they weren't all given names. And I'll go on to tell you about another animal that came forward, that Laika brought forward with her. They weren't all given names right away because if the experiment failed, they didn't want public outcry of people being attached to them because of the names. As if the names are very important, but as if the name gave them life. They were still beings before they had a name. And it's funny, isn't it? Again, it's one of those things people can attach names to animals, and then we call them pets. But we'd think nothing about, something else. Like I said, like in my past, killing a spider because it's not my pet, is it? But that's not right. That's not the way to be. That's not showing loving kindness to all living things. And it just really highlights the lack of compassion and understanding of animals, and the willingness to understand animals too. And that's what I said, part of my work is about the willingness to understand the animal kingdom. And while they are very different from us, they are also very similar to us in, you know, the things that they experience emotionally, psychologically, spiritually. But it also just shows the varying degrees of value that humans put on life. And it goes back to what I said before about how we'll make decisions based on what we hear, not always even what we know to be true from our own experience. We make decisions about who deserves to live and who deserves to die and who's better, who's worse. How and why do we think that we're entitled to make those decisions? One thing that Laika said to me was that those who are driven by greed and ego feel untouchable. Animals, humans, nature, they are all just pawns in their great experiment to advance and better only themselves. And we see a lot of this. Again, it was like, oh my goodness, like I felt like she kept on opening my eyes to the bigger picture, looking deeper into things that I was kind of aware of but hadn't really thought of. You think about some of these charities and places that ask for so much money from kind-hearted people to carry out research, and yet they never make any advancements. Do we not think that's odd? Again, they're relying on your kindness, of you wanting to help, but what are they actually doing? What in the name of research are they doing? Are they actually doing things to better people, or are they doing it to line their own pockets, to receive awards and prizes and accolades, to say, look at me, I'm great? We have to start looking into things and not just hearing and seeing on a surface level. And that is part of, you know, part of discernment, but also our survival depends upon it. Because if we continue to see and hear and trust what we are just being fed on a daily basis, we're making decisions based on those things. And they could be, you know, what's the agenda behind it? Is it greed and power? Is it divide? Do we really know when we're making these decisions? Are we really consciously making these decisions? We should all look a little bit deeper at ourselves, at the wider world, and ask, whenever something comes up where we're being asked to view someone or something as less than or more important than, why? Who benefits and why? And I can be sure it's never for the benefit of everyone, for the benefit of the few. I just want to check through anything else that Laika was saying before I move on. Yeah, she's saying it's okay to move on. It's okay to move on. So she just has such a beautiful energy. She still has she has a very puppy-like energy because she was very young, but she also has this like real streetwise energy. And I feel like she was actually a bit like mother dog to the little crew that she was in. And I'm seeing like a tan, kind of a tan and black, like it's like a brindle color, I think you would call it. Like it's got like the brown fur with black flecks in it. A male dog that was with her too, and they were almost like the parents in this little crew. He used to look out for her because she was quite small, and she was really good. She was really good at finding, she says, the best places to eat. She would know where, you know, perhaps like with restaurants and things where scraps were being thrown out, or where people would visit and kind people would leave food. And she said there were some kind people that knew them and would leave food. So her life, you know, I think as well, it's been portrayed that, oh, you know, it's so sad she was a street dog, and, you know, this is better for her because at least her life meant something. Her life did mean something, but it meant something perfectly fine, living on the street, because that's what she was used to. She doesn't become, you know, more important or her life have more meaning because she became famous through cruelty and torture. Her life had all the meaning in the world, and it still has meaning. And when I talk about Laika to people now, I will talk about the amazing dog she is, and that part of what happened is not who she was. That was something that happened to her, that was cruelly done to her without her choice, without her consent, without her participation. And she's just wonderful. Her energy and spirit is beautiful. And what she was actually showing me as well was there is a male scientist. There's a male scientist that she is now working with. And I couldn't quite see. I could just see this chap. Couldn't see his face. I could see him bent over in a lab, and he was wearing a white lab coat. He was bending over a lab bench, and he was writing something up. And she's working with this scientist now, and he is someone who, I'm just looking for the note where I wrote it. He is working to raise awareness of the treatment of animals, their complexities, and steering research in a non-invasive way without testing on animals. And she says he's very much back to basics, research, humans first. Not everyone in the field is bad. Some genuinely do care. Others only pretend to care to gain fame and favour. So there are people, and she is actively working with people and helping to guide and steer them from spirit. There are people that genuinely do care, and they do want to make things better, to raise awareness so that we are not testing on animals. And I think that's really lovely. And that actually did give me a lot of hope. I feel like with this video, because we've been talking for quite a long time, I feel like what I will do is I will stop this video and I will start a new video with the other animals that Laika brought through to me. So there will be a part 2 to this. So as I said, I know it seems weird to say, please like this video, but liking it gets it out to more people. And I think it's so important that people do know exactly what she went through, and they need to know that this still goes on. We need to raise awareness and to honour their lives for the beautiful animals that they are, and not just to remember them for the products of scientific experiment passed off as achievement. So please do give it a like, please share it, please comment, let me know if you knew about Laika, if you actually knew in detail anything, because I certainly didn't. This research has opened my eyes to so much more, and it has given me, even though it's upset me deeply, it has given me kind of like a fire and a passion to dive more deeply into these things. And I know, like with Laika beside me, she held my hand through this and helped me, and just gave me that comfort that sadly she wasn't given, but she gave me that comfort to know that I could tackle this and to go through it, to see and to understand, so that I could raise awareness and share it with you. So please do give it a like. Let me know in the comments if you knew about Laika's story, and look out for part 2, as I'm going to start recording again to talk about some of the other animals that have also been subject to space experiments. Thanks for listening. I'll speak to you again in my next video.